She, a pregnant and alone executive assistant, is fired and humiliated. He, a powerful CEO, discovers the injustice and is outraged. Driven by a protective instinct, he confronts her in her despair. To Olivia's shock, Julian rehires her and proposes, "I won't allow you to be treated like this. Let me take care of you and your child. Be my wife." Prepare for a twist where a marriage out of outrage becomes a scandal, but the power of true love will prove unbreakable, and a cold tycoon will transform into his wife and child's greatest champion. Watch this story until the end. You'll be surprised. If you like love stories, romance, subscribe to this channel, leave your comment. We post videos like this every day. Monday morning began like any other for Olivia Morales. The alarm clock rang at 5:30, and she got up carefully so as not to wake her mom, who was sleeping in the next room. The two-bedroom apartment in Queens wasn't big enough for 3 people, but it was all they could afford on her junior executive assistant salary. While preparing breakfast, Olivia felt that strange sensation in her stomach again. For 2 weeks, she'd been ignoring the symptoms, attributing everything to work stress and constant financial worries. But when she passed the pharmacy over the weekend and saw the pregnancy tests on the shelf, a terrible suspicion began to form in her mind. "It can't be," she muttered to herself, stirring sugar into her coffee more forcefully than necessary. Raphael had disappeared more than a month ago after promising they would get married when he got a better job. The calls stopped, the messages went unanswered, and Olivia had to accept the painful reality. She had been abandoned. Across town, on the top floors of the gleaming Vance Holdings building in Manhattan, Julian Vance had already been at his desk for 2 hours. At 39, he had built an empire of investments and technology worth billions, but the price of that ascent had been high. His personal life was a desert of superficial relationships and shady dealings. The 7 a.m. meeting with the directors ended with Julian irritated. The last quarter's numbers were good, but there were information leaks that deeply bothered him. Trust was a rare commodity in his world, and he had learned to distrust everyone. "Mr. Vance," the voice of his executive assistant, Marcia Sullivan, echoed through the intercom. "I need to speak with you about a sensitive HR matter." Marcia Sullivan entered the room with a file in her hand and an uncomfortable expression. She was an efficient woman, but Julian had always perceived a coldness in her that bordered on cruelty. When it came to employees she considered problematic. "It's about the junior assistant on the 12th floor, Olivia Morales," Marcia began, placing the file on the desk. "We have a situation that requires immediate action." Julian didn't even look up from the documents. Olivia Morales. The name sounded vaguely familiar, but among the more than 1,000 employees at the company, it was impossible to know everyone. "What kind of situation?" "She's pregnant," Marcia said with a tone that made her disapproval clear. "And from what we've heard, she's not married. It's causing comments in the office, and frankly, it's not the kind of example we want to set for other employees." Finally, Julian looked up. There was something in Marcia's tone that bothered him. "And what exactly is the problem with her being pregnant?" "Mr. Vance, you know how it is. A single pregnant employee. It affects productivity, creates leave issues, and the gossip has already started. It would be better for everyone if she were relocated, or better yet, if we took advantage of the department restructuring to optimize costs." Julian knew this corporate language. Marcia was suggesting firing the girl. "What's her record like?" Marcia opened the file reluctantly. "Well, technically, she has an excellent evaluation. Punctual, dedicated, efficient, but that was before the situation." "Situation?" Julian repeated, feeling a growing irritation. "You're referring to the pregnancy as a situation?" "Mr. Vance, I'm just thinking about the company's interests." Julian slammed the file shut. "Schedule a meeting with legal regarding labor laws related to pregnancy." "Now, but sir..." "Now, Marcia." When he was alone, Julian got up and went to the panoramic window that overlooked the entire city of New York. Something in that conversation had awakened a painful memory. His own mother had been fired from a job when she was pregnant with him, years before she met the man who would become his stepfather and change their lives. He remembered her tears, the humiliation, the night she cried thinking he couldn't hear. 2 hours later, Julian received confirmation that Olivia Morales had been fired. Cost cutting, the official report said. But when he asked to see the other names on the layoff list, he found that she was the only one. The anger he felt was instantaneous and overwhelming. Matthiasin. Olivia clutched the box with her few personal belongings as she walked through the Vance Holdings hallway for the last time. The tears she had managed to hold back during the humiliating conversation with HR now streamed freely down her face. Restructuring, they had said, but she knew the truth. Someone had told them about her pregnancy, and that had sealed her fate. In the elevator, some colleagues looked away, others whispered amongst themselves. The news had already spread. Olivia squeezed the box against her chest, trying to protect both her belongings and the secret growing inside her. 3 positive pregnancy tests stored in her drawer at home confirmed her worst fears. Meanwhile, on the top floor, Julian Vance was having the worst argument of his business career with his own human resources team. "You fired an exemplary employee because she's pregnant," he said, his voice dangerously low. "That's not just morally repugnant, it's illegal." The HR director, Carl Mendelsohn, tried to explain. "Mr. Vance, the decision was made considering several factors." "What factors?" Julian slammed his hand on the table. "She has the best evaluation in the department, never missed a day, never been late. The only factor here is pure and simple prejudice." "Sir, perhaps it's best to let this go. The company could face bigger problems if... If what? If we treat our employees with dignity." Julian stood up abruptly. "I want her address, now." "Mr. Vance, with all due respect, a former employee shouldn't be..." "The address, Carl. I won't repeat myself." 2 hours later, Julian was standing in front of the modest apartment building in Queens, a neighborhood he only knew from the socio-economic reports that crossed his desk. His silver Mercedes stood out completely from the local landscape, attracting curious glances and a few people who approached for a better look. Julian hesitated for a moment. What exactly was he doing here? He had built his reputation on maintaining distance from employees' personal problems, but something about the injustice of that firing had awakened a fury he couldn't control. He climbed the 3 flights of stairs to apartment 32. When he knocked on the door, he heard hesitant footsteps on the other side. "Who is it?" a female voice asked, clearly apprehensive. "Julian Vance," he replied. "CEO of Vance Holdings. I need to speak with you." The silence that followed was long. Finally, the door opened a crack, revealing the face of a young woman with dark eyes and a cautious expression. Julian felt an unexpected impact upon seeing her up close for the first time. Olivia Morales was beautiful in a natural, uncomplicated way that contrasted drastically with the women in his social circle. What do you want?" she asked, her voice trembling. "Can I come in? I need to explain what happened today." Olivia opened the door wider, still suspicious. The apartment was small and simple, but impeccably clean and organized. Julian noticed an elderly woman sleeping in an armchair in front of the television. "My mom," Olivia explained in a low voice. "She works the graveyard shift as a cleaner at the hospital." The information hit Julian like a punch to the gut. This woman supported her sick mother, and they had destroyed her only source of income. "Miss Morales, I did not authorize your dismissal," he said directly. "In fact, I didn't even know it had happened until a few hours ago." Olivia stared at him with a mixture of confusion and disbelief. "Then why?" "Because some employees at my company decided that a pregnant employee would be a problem," Julian said, his anger showing in his voice. "And that's unacceptable." Olivia's chin trembled. "Everyone already knows. In the office, in the building, Everyone knows I was fired because I'm pregnant. Who's going to give me a job now? Julian observed this woman, young, vulnerable, but with a dignity that hadn't been broken even by the humiliation of that day. There was a quiet strength in her that intrigued him, and at the same time awakened a protective instinct in him that he didn't know he possessed. "I will," he said impulsively. "You'll do what? Give you a job? You come back tomorrow?" Olivia shook her head. "Mr. Vance, that's only going to make things worse. The other employees will think that I did something to get this." Julian realized that she was right. The corporate world was merciless to women in vulnerable situations. If she came back like that, she would be seen as someone who had used her pregnancy to blackmail the CEO. "Then what do you propose?" he asked, genuinely interested in her answer. Olivia studied him for a long moment. There was something in those dark eyes of Julian Vance that disarmed her. Power, yes, but also a directed anger that wasn't against her, but for her. "I don't know," she said honestly. "I just know that I need to work. I have my mother to take care of." And now she unconsciously touched her still flat stomach. "The child's father?" Julian asked, surprising himself with his own curiosity. Olivia's face closed off. "There is no father. There's just a man who ran when things got tough." The brutal honesty of the answer hit Julian. He knew men like that very well. He had been raised by one until he was 8 years old, when his mother finally had the courage to leave. "I have a proposal," he said slowly, a daring idea forming in his mind. "But you need to trust me." "Trust you?" Olivia laughed without humor. "You don't even know me. I'm just another fired employee." "No," Julian said with a conviction that surprised him. "You're definitely not just another employee." His phone rang, interrupting the moment. It was Marcia, probably wanting to know where he was. Julian hung up without answering. "I need to go," he said, "but this isn't over. Do you have my card?" Olivia shook her head. Julian took a card out of his pocket and wrote his personal number on the back. "Call me by tomorrow night. I have a solution for this, but I need you to trust me. And if I don't call..." Julian stopped at the door and looked at her. "Then a great injustice will go uncorrected, and I can't live with that." After he left, Olivia was left holding the card, feeling that her life had taken a completely unexpected turn. Outside, she could hear the engine of the expensive car driving away, taking with it the most powerful man she had ever met, and who, for some incomprehensible reason, seemed genuinely concerned about her. Olivia spent the entire night staring at Julian Vance's card. At 6 in the morning, when her mum woke up to get ready for work, she was still sitting at the kitchen table, turning the small white rectangle between her fingers. "Didn't sleep, honey?" asked Helena, noticing her daughter's dark circles. "Some things happened yesterday," Olivia said, not knowing how to explain that the richest man in New York had shown up at her door. At 9 in the morning, she finally dialed the number. Julian answered on the first ring. "I thought you weren't going to call," he said, and Olivia detected genuine relief in his voice. "I still don't know if I should," she replied honestly. "Can you come to my office? I have a concrete proposal to make." An hour later, Olivia was on the top floor of Vance Holdings, in a world completely different from the 12th floor where she had worked. Julian's secretary, a different woman from the one who had fired her, greeted her with courteous professionalism, but Olivia couldn't help but notice the curious glances. Julian's office was impressive, floor-to-ceiling glass, a panoramic view of the city, furniture that probably cost more than she earned in a year. But what impressed her most was how Julian looked different there, more imposing, more distant, as if the environment transformed him. "Thank you for coming," he said, indicating an armchair in front of his desk. "I spent the night thinking about your situation." "My situation," Olivia repeated, and Julian perceived the defensive tone. "Sorry, I didn't mean to sound condescending." He got up and went to the window. "What I meant was that I spent the night thinking about how to correct the injustice that was done. And did you come to any conclusions?" Julian turned to face her. "Several, but they all run into the same problem: prejudice. If I simply rehire you, you'll be seen as the pregnant employee who got her job back by using her pregnancy. If I create a special position for you, it'll be even worse. Olivia felt her heart sink. Then there's no solution. I didn't say that. Julian went back behind the desk, but didn't sit down. There is a way out, but it requires you to trust me completely, which is, marry me. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia stared at him as if he had gone crazy. Excuse me, I didn't hear you right. You heard perfectly. Julian sat down, assuming a more formal posture. A marriage of convenience. You become my wife, automatically gain a social standing that no one will dare question, and your child will have my name and my protection, Mr. Vance. That's absurd. It's practical, he corrected. I gain a wife who isn't interested in my money because she doesn't know me well enough for that, and you gain financial and social security. Olivia stood up abruptly. Do you think I'm some kind of prostitute who would sell herself for money? Her reaction clearly surprised him. No, that's not what I meant. That's exactly what you meant. Olivia was furious. A desperate, pregnant employee who would accept anything. Julian stood up too, realizing that he had messed everything up. Olivia, please let me explain. There's nothing to explain. Thank you for the offer, but I'm not for sale. She was already heading for the door when his voice stopped her. My mother was also fired when she was pregnant. Olivia stopped with her hand on the doorknob but didn't turn around. I was 8 years old, Julian continued, his voice lower. She worked as a cleaner in an office downtown. When they found out she was pregnant, they made up an excuse and sent her away, just like they did with you. Slowly, Olivia turned to face him. Julian was no longer in his business posture. There was something vulnerable in his expression. My biological father had disappeared months before. My mother had to raise 2 children alone, working 3 different jobs, humiliated, discriminated against, judged by everyone. He paused. Until she met my stepfather, who married her and adopted us. And that changed everything, Olivia asked softly. It changed our survival. But their marriage, it wasn't for love, at least not initially. It was out of necessity. She needed security. He needed a family. Julian approached a few steps, but over time, they truly fell in love. They were married for 25 years until he died. Olivia slowly returned to the armchair. Why are you telling me this? Because when I saw your situation, I saw my mother. And because... He hesitated, as if he were admitting something difficult. Because I'm 39 years old, and I've never had a real family. All the women I've met wanted my money or my position. You didn't even know who I was until yesterday. And you think that's the basis for a marriage? I think it's a more honest basis than most of the marriages I know, Julian said. There would be no lies or romantic expectations. It would be an agreement between 2 adults who would mutually benefit. Olivia was silent for a long moment. And if I wanted to get a divorce later, whenever you wanted, with alimony that would guarantee your future and your child's, why would you do that for a stranger? Julian studied her before answering. Maybe because we're not strangers. Maybe because I recognize in you something that I saw in my mother. Strength, dignity, the refusal to give up even when everything falls apart. He paused. And maybe because for the first time in my life, I have the opportunity to be the man who saved someone instead of just another rich man who didn't make a difference to anyone. The raw honesty of the answer left Olivia speechless. She watched him, really watched him, and saw beyond the expensive suit and the powerful posture. There was loneliness there and a need for genuine connection that he was trying to disguise with practical arguments. I need time to think, she said finally. How much time? A few days? Julian nodded. There's one more thing you need to know before you decide. What? He hesitated, as if he were about to reveal his biggest secret. My family, they won't accept this easily. My stepmother has other plans for me, including some marriage arrangements with suitable families. A marriage with you would be seen as a scandal. One more reason not to do it, Olivia murmured. Or the perfect reason, Julian said with a dark smile. Sometimes, causing the right scandal is the only way to live the life you really want. 3 days later, Olivia still hadn't given an answer when life made the decision for her. It was a rainy Thursday when she left the doctor's appointment at the local clinic in Queens. The prenatal exam had confirmed her suspicions. She was 12 weeks along. The doctor had been direct. She needed rest, good nutrition, and regular checkups, luxuries that her financial situation didn't allow. On the way home, she stopped at the corner grocery store to buy the basics with the little money she had left. She was choosing between milk and bread. There wasn't money for both when she heard a familiar voice. Olivia Morales. She turned and saw Rafael Santos, the man who had abandoned her when she needed him most. He was well-dressed, with a new watch on his wrist and a smile that she had once found charming. "Rafael," she said coldly, instinctively placing her hand over her still discreet stomach. "Wow, what a coincidence. You look different." His gaze went down to her waist. "Gained a little weight." Olivia didn't answer, but he caught the message in her body language. "Wait a minute," Rafael said, the smile disappearing. Is it mine?" "It's no one's but mine," Olivia replied, trying to move away. Rafael grabbed her arm. "Hold on. If it's my kid, I have rights." "Rights?" Olivia pulled away forcefully. "What rights? You disappeared, Rafael. Changed your phone, didn't answer messages. Where were you when I needed you? I was sorting out my life, and now that I've got a better job, I can take responsibility." Olivia stared at him with disdain. "Your responsibilities? You don't want to take responsibility for anything. You want to know what I have so you can decide if it's worth it or not." The argument had attracted attention in the small market. Other people began to stop to listen, and Olivia felt the familiar humiliation rising in her throat. "Look, Rafael," she said quietly, "I don't want anything from you. Forget you saw me. What if I don't want to forget? What if I want to be part of my child's life?" There was something in his voice that didn't sound like responsible fatherhood. It sounded like opportunism. Olivia left the store without buying anything, but Rafael followed her. On the sidewalk, away from prying ears, he showed his true intentions. "I heard you got fired," he said casually. "You must be desperate for money. How did you find out? News travels fast. I also heard that the CEO of Vance Holdings showed up in Queens looking for you." Rafael smiled maliciously. "Julian Vance, no less. Interesting, don't you think?" Olivia's blood ran cold. "What are you talking about?" "I'm talking about opportunities, Olivia. A man like that doesn't come to Queens by accident. If there's something going on between you two, I can be very understanding for a fair price." "You're crazy. I'm being realistic. You have access to a billionaire. I have rights to this child. We can make a deal that benefits everyone." The threat was clear. Rafael didn't want to be a father. He wanted to use paternity as a bargaining chip. "Go away, Rafael." "I'll think about it, Olivia, because if we don't reach an amicable agreement, I can look for other means. I have legal rights over this child." When he finally walked away, Olivia was shaking. She went back home in a panic, realizing that the situation had become much more complex and dangerous. That night, her mother had a crisis. Helena had been hiding the worsening of her diabetes, but she collapsed in the kitchen, unconscious. Olivia called 911, but at the hospital, the doctors were direct. Immediate hospitalization and more intensive treatment were needed, which Medicaid would take months to approve. "How much would private treatment cost?" Olivia asked, already knowing she couldn't afford it. "Between $15,000 and $20,000, the doctor replied, "and that's just to stabilize her. Ongoing treatment would be more expensive." Olivia left the hospital at 2 a.m, completely devastated. She sat on the park bench in front of the hospital, and for the first time since she found out she was pregnant, cried uncontrollably. She was alone, pregnant, unemployed, being blackmailed by the child's father, and now with her mother hospitalized, needing treatment she couldn't afford. That's when the phone rang. Julian Vance. "Olivia? I know it's late, but she's hospitalized," Olivia said between sobs. "My mother's hospitalized, and I don't have the money to save her." "Where are you?" "At St. Camilla's Hospital in East Side. Don't leave there, I'm coming." "Mr. Vance, you don't have to—" "Julian. Call me Julian. And yes, I do." He arrived 40 minutes later, driving a black BMW himself. When he saw Olivia on the park bench, crying and clearly in shock, something transformed in his chest. It wasn't pity, it was an overwhelming need to protect her. "Tell me everything," he said, sitting down next to her. Olivia told him about Raphael, about the veiled threats, about her mother's condition. Julian listened in silence, his anger growing with each word. "How much does the treatment cost?" "Julian, I can't accept." "How much?" $20,000 to start. Julian took out his phone and right there transferred $50,000 to the hospital's account, ensuring the best treatment available for Helena. "Why are you doing this?" Olivia asked, stunned. Julian looked at her. "Because you need it, and because—" He hesitated. "Because when my mother was desperate, no one showed up to help her. Maybe it's my chance to balance the universe." "What about Raphael?" Julian's face hardened. "Leave him to me." At that moment, under the dim light of the park's lampposts, with the smell of the hospital impregnated in her clothes and the weight of the last few hours on her shoulders, Olivia made her decision. "I accept," she said softly. "Accept what?" "Your marriage proposal." Julian studied her carefully. "Are you sure? I don't want it to be out of gratitude for what I did today." "It's not just gratitude," Olivia said, surprising herself with her own honesty. "It's because for the first time in my life, someone showed up when I needed them. And because—" She paused. "Because I think you need someone too, even if you don't admit it." Julian felt something stir in his chest, a feeling he had been trying to suppress for years. "The consequences of this will be enormous," he warned. "My family, the press, the corporate world, everyone will judge us." "Let them judge," Olivia said with a determination that impressed them both. "I've already been judged for being pregnant and single. Being judged for being married to you can't be worse." Julian smiled, the first genuine smile she had seen on him. "Then it's decided. We're getting married." What they didn't know was that Raphael had been watching from afar, photographing the nightly encounter between them, and that those photos would soon be in the hands of people very interested in destroying Julian Vance. The wedding took place on a Friday morning at City Hall with only 2 witnesses, Julian's driver and the nurse who cared for Helena. Olivia wore a simple navy blue dress that Julian had insisted on buying, and he was in a dark suit, without a tie, a more casual version of the tycoon the world knew. "Why aren't we telling anyone yet?" Olivia asked as they signed the documents. "Because we need a strategy," Julian replied. "When this news leaks, and it will leak, we want to control the narrative." They maintained separate residences for now. Olivia continued in the apartment in Queens, taking care of her mother who had been discharged from the hospital, while Julian remained in his penthouse in Manhattan. Publicly, nothing had changed, but between them, a strange intimacy began to develop. Julian visited her every night after work, always with some excuse, bringing medication for Helena, discussing legal details of the marriage, or simply checking how things were. Olivia began to wait for these visits, preparing dinner for 3 and discovering that she liked to hear Julian talk about his day. "You don't have to come here every day," she said on a Tuesday as he helped wash the dishes. "I know," he replied, but he didn't stop coming. It was in the 2nd week of marriage that everything began to fall apart. Julian was in a meeting with Japanese investors when Marcia Sullivan entered the room with an expression he couldn't decipher. "Mr. Vance, I need to speak with you urgently," she said, clearly agitated. Julian excused himself from the Japanese investors and followed Marcia to his office. "What is it?" Marcia placed a folder on the desk with trembling hands. "I received this morning, by anonymous email." Julian opened the folder and felt his blood run cold. There were photos of him and Olivia on the square in front of the hospital, on the night she had accepted his proposal. The images had been taken from afar, with a phone, but they were clear enough. One showed Julian comforting Olivia, another showed them talking intensely, and a third captured the moment when he had put his hand on her face. "There's more," Marcia said, her voice almost a whisper. The next photo was from City Hall, taken through the window. Julian and Olivia signing the marriage document. "Who sent this?" Julian asked, his voice dangerously low. "I don't know, but it came with a message." Marcia showed him the printed email. The CEO of Vance Holdings secretly married the pregnant employee who was fired from the company for discrimination. What an interesting story. It would be a shame if this leaked to the press, unless someone is interested in talking about settlements. Julian crumpled the paper tightly. "Rafael Santos," he muttered. "Who?" "The child's biological father. He's blackmailing us." But the situation was worse than Julian imagined. At that same moment across town, Olivia was receiving an unexpected visitor. The doorbell rang at 3 in the afternoon. When Olivia opened the door, she found an elegant woman of approximately 60 years old, dressed in an expensive tweed suit and carrying a designer purse that cost more than Olivia earned in a year. "You must be Olivia," the woman said with a cold smile. "I'm Beatrice Vance, Julian's stepmother." Olivia's heart skipped a beat. "Mrs. Vance, Julian didn't say that. That I was coming? I imagine not. My stepson has a terrible habit of hiding important information." Beatrice entered without being invited. "May I sit down? We have a lot to talk about." Olivia led her to the small living room, painfully aware of how modest her apartment must seem in that woman's eyes. "I heard about your marriage," Beatrice said, the words sounding like a disease. "What an interesting situation. If Julian didn't tell you about our marriage, how did you find out?" Beatrice smiled. "Darling, I have much more information about you than you imagine. I know about your dismissal, your pregnancy, your financial situation, and I also know about the photos that someone is using to blackmail my stepson." Olivia felt the world spinning. "What photos?" "Ah, so Julian didn't tell you." Beatrice opened her purse and took out copies of the same photos that were on Julian's desk. "Someone photographed you too on the night you came to an understanding. And now they're asking for money not to leak those images to the press." "This is..." Olivia sat down heavily on the sofa. "Rafael, the child's father, yes. He contacted me yesterday." Beatrice studied her perfectly manicured nails. "He offered me a very interesting deal." "What kind of deal?" "He hands over the original photos to me, and I make sure that you disappear from Julian's life. Forever." The silence that followed was heavy. Olivia felt like she was in a nightmare. "And if I don't accept, then the photos leak to every newspaper in New York tomorrow morning. Julian will be painted as the predatory CEO who took advantage of a vulnerable employee. You will be seen as the opportunist who got pregnant to blackmail a billionaire. His reputation will be ruined, and you will be torn apart publicly." Beatrice got up and walked to the window. "Or you accept my offer. $5 million to disappear, annul the marriage, move to another city, raise your child far from here. Julian will never have any problems again. And why would you do that?" Beatrice turned around, and for the first time, Olivia saw real emotion in her eyes. "Because I love Julian as if he were my own son. I watched him build this empire from nothing, overcome a childhood of poverty and abandonment. I'm not going to let a situation like this destroy everything he's worked for." "He loves me," Olivia said, more to herself than to Beatrice. "Darling," Beatrice laughed without humor, "Julian married you out of pity. You've known each other for 2 weeks. That's not love. It's unresolved guilt over his childhood traumas. The words hit Olivia like punches because deep down she knew that Beatrice could be right. "I need time to think," she said. "You have until tomorrow at noon. After that, I can no longer control what happens." After Beatrice left, Olivia was left alone with the photos scattered on the kitchen table. Each image showed a moment that she had considered intimate and true, now transformed into evidence of something sordid. When Julian arrived that night, he found Olivia pale and silent. "What happened?" he asked. Olivia studied him carefully. The man who had married her out of compassion or out of love. The savior who had appeared in her darkest hour, or the calculating businessman who saw her as a way to resolve problems of conscience. "Your stepmother came to visit me today," she said finally. Julian's expression closed off completely. "What did she want?" "To offer me $5 million to disappear from your life." Julian closed his eyes for a moment. When he opened them, there was a cold fury that Olivia had never seen before. "And what did you answer?" "I haven't answered yet. I have until tomorrow at noon." Julian approached her slowly. "Olivia, no matter what she said, no matter how this started, this here between us is real." "Is it?" Olivia asked, and Julian heard all the vulnerability and doubt that she was trying to hide. "Or are you trying to save a woman who reminds you of your mother?" Julian didn't answer immediately, and that silence said more than 1,000 words. The decision was made by Olivia during a sleepless night. At 5 in the morning, she called Beatrice Vance. "I accept the offer," she said simply. "Wise decision," Beatrice replied. "The money will be transferred this afternoon. I expect you to keep your part of the agreement." Olivia spent the day packing her few belongings. When Julian arrived at 7 in the evening, as he always did, he found the suitcases ready in the living room, and Olivia sitting at the kitchen table with papers spread out in front of her. "What does this mean?" he asked, a sense of panic beginning to form in his chest. "It means you were right from the beginning," Olivia said without looking up from the documents. "This was just a business agreement, and I'm rescinding the contract." Julian sat down heavily in the chair in front of her. "Olivia, what did my stepmother say to you?" "The truth." Finally, she looked at him. "That you married me out of pity. That this is nothing more than unresolved guilt from your childhood. That I'm a charity project for you to feel better about yourself. And you believe that?" Olivia hesitated for a fraction of a second, a moment that didn't go unnoticed by Julian. "I believe you're a good man who tried to do the right thing, but that's not the basis for a marriage." Julian picked up the annulment documents that were on the table. $5 million, he read aloud. "Was that the price of your conscience?" The coldness in his voice hit her like a slap. "Don't be cruel, Julian." "Cruel?" Julian stood up abruptly. "I'm the one being cruel. You're abandoning me for money, and I'm the cruel one." "I'm freeing you," Olivia exploded, standing up too. "You don't have to carry the burden of saving the pregnant and abandoned employee anymore. You can go back to your world of suitable women and arranged marriages." "What if I don't want to go back to that world?" "Then you're confusing gratitude with love, just like I was confusing things." The words hung in the air between them. Julian stared at her for a long moment, looking for some sign that she was lying, that deep down she didn't want to leave. But all he saw was a painful determination. "Fine," he said finally, his voice returning to the business tone he used in meetings. "If that's what you want." "That's what I want." Julian picked up the papers and signed them without reading. "When are you leaving?" "Tomorrow morning. I'm going to Pennsylvania, to my aunt's house in Pittsburgh." "And your mother?" "She's coming with me. Her treatment can continue there." Julian nodded and headed for the door. On the threshold, he stopped without turning around. "Wherever you go, Olivia, I hope you're happy." After he left, Olivia collapsed into the chair and cried until she had no more tears. What she didn't know was that at that exact moment, Raphael was putting his final plan into action. The next morning, as Olivia and Helena boarded the bus to Pennsylvania, the front page of the New York Gazette screamed the headline, "Scandal. Vance Holdings CEO secretly marries employee Fired for pregnancy. The article was devastating. It contained not only the photos that Raphael had taken, but also statements from anonymous company employees, details about Olivia's dismissal, and speculation about the true motives for the marriage. The text insinuated that Julian had taken advantage of Olivia's vulnerable situation to satisfy personal desires, and that she had used her pregnancy to blackmail him. Julian discovered the scandal when he arrived at the office and found a crowd of reporters at the entrance of the building. Marcia was waiting for him in the private elevator with a panicked expression. "Mr. Vance, I tried to call you all night. How long do we have before this completely explodes?" Julian asked, immediately going into crisis mode. "It's already exploded. The article is being reproduced by every news outlet. Our lawyers are trying to get an injunction, but the damage is already done," Julian completed. In the office, his phone wouldn't stop ringing. Investors wanting explanations, board members demanding an emergency meeting, journalists asking for interviews. In 2 hours, Vance Holdings' stock had plummeted 15%. The emergency board meeting was brutal. Julian faced 2 hours of hostile questioning about his questionable judgments and behavior inappropriate for a CEO. "Julian," said Robert Farris, the most senior board member, "you need to understand the gravity of the situation. This isn't just about your personal life. It's about the credibility of the company." "And what solution do you propose?" Julian asked, although he already knew the answer. "A temporary leave of absence," Farris replied. "You step aside for a few months, let the dust settle, and then we reassess the situation." Julian laughed without humor. "You want me to resign? We want you to think about what's best for the company you built." That night, alone in his penthouse, Julian poured himself a whiskey and stared out at the city through the panoramic windows. Everything he had worked for 20 years was collapsing because of one morning at City Hall and some malicious photos. The phone rang. It was Beatrice. "I saw the news," she said without preamble. "I'm sorry it came to this." "You knew this was going to happen," Julian said. It wasn't a question. A long silence on the other end of the line. "I hoped that Raphael would be content with what I paid him to destroy the original photos. Apparently, he made copies. You paid him to destroy the photos after Olivia accepted your offer. I tried to protect you, Julian, in the way that I could." Julian closed his eyes. "You manipulated the entire situation. You made Olivia believe that I didn't love her. You paid her to leave, and you still couldn't prevent the scandal. I did what I thought was best." Julian hung up the phone. That same night in Pittsburgh, Olivia was watching the news on the small television in her aunt's house when the article about Julian appeared. The anchor was talking about the scandal that was shaking one of the country's largest business empires, while showing old photos of Julian and fragments of the images that Raphael had taken. "According to sources close to the businessman," the anchor continued, "the marriage was annulled last week, and the ex-wife disappeared with a substantial amount of money." Olivia felt the world spinning. They were painting her as an opportunist who had blackmailed Julian and then fled with his money. And Julian was being torn apart publicly for trying to do the right thing. "Goodness," murmured Aunt Carol. "What a terrible situation. The poor man tried to help, and look what happened." Olivia ran to the bathroom and vomited, not because of the pregnancy, but because of the overwhelming guilt that consumed her. By trying to protect Julian, she had given Raphael and Beatrice exactly the weapons they needed to destroy him. And now, it was too late to fix anything. A week after the scandal, Julian had lost 15% of the value of his shares, 3 major international contracts, and the trust of the board of directors. He was formally removed from the presidency of the company until the situation normalizes, a corporate euphemism for a disguised dismissal. In Pittsburgh, Olivia spent her days in a state of lethargy, obsessively watching the news about the destruction of Julian's reputation. The guilt consumed her so much that she could barely eat, worrying Helena and Aunt Carol. It was on a Thursday that everything changed. Olivia was in the backyard of her aunt's house, trying to get some morning sun, when her phone rang. Unknown number from New York. "Hello, Olivia Morales?" an unknown female voice asked. "Yes, my name is Ana Cristina Ferreira. I'm an investigative journalist for the New York Times. I really need to talk to you." Olivia almost hung up, but something in the urgency of the voice made her hesitate. About what? About Rafael Santos and Beatrice Vance. "I've discovered some things you need to know." 2 hours later, Olivia was on a video call with Ana Cristina, a woman in her early 40s with a determined expression. "I've been investigating this story since it broke," Ana Cristina explained. "There are inconsistencies that don't sit right with me. For example, how did Rafael get those photos so specific? How did he know exactly where you'd be that night?" Olivia frowned. "I never thought about that. And there's more. I managed to track the payments. Rafael received 2 bank transfers, one for $50,000 3 days before the story leaked. Guess where it came from?" "Where?" "From an offshore account linked to Beatrice Vance." Olivia's blood ran cold. "That means that she paid Rafael to leak the story, even after you accepted her deal." Ana Cristina leaned forward on the screen. "Olivia, you were manipulated. Both of you were. But why would she do that? I had already agreed to leave Julian's life. Because she knew that Julian would come after you, and she needed him to hate you, so he would never try to find you again." Olivia felt tears burning her eyes. She planned everything. "There's more," Ana Cristina continued. "I discovered that Beatrice has an arranged marriage agreement for Julian. Isabella Montero, heiress to the Montero Steel Group. The company merger contract has been ready for months, just waiting for Julian to accept. And with the scandal, with Julian removed from the company and publicly humiliated, he becomes vulnerable. Beatrice assumes temporary controlling interest and can force both the marriage and the business merger." Olivia was silent, processing the magnitude of the manipulation. "Why are you telling me this?" she asked finally. "Because I believe you were victims, not villains, and because Julian Vance doesn't deserve to have his life destroyed for trying to do the right thing." Ana Cristina paused. "But I need concrete proof. Would you be willing to help me expose this sham?" "How?" "By going back to New York, confronting Rafael, and getting him to confess that he was paid by Beatrice." Olivia laughed bitterly. "You think he's just going to confess? He will, if the alternative is worse for him." That same afternoon, while Olivia struggled with the decision to return to New York, Julian was in his apartment, receiving an unexpected visit. Marcus Vance, his younger half-brother, appeared at the door with a somber expression. "I need to talk to you," Marcus said. "It's about Beatrice." Julian let him in, surprised. Marcus had always been Beatrice's favorite son, the heir she wanted to take over the business. "I discovered some things that aren't right," Marcus began, clearly uncomfortable. "About the scandal, about your wife." "Ex-wife," Julian corrected bitterly. "No, Julian, wife. You never formalized the annulment." Julian frowned. "What do you mean?" Marcus pulled some papers out of his pocket. "I went to investigate because some details didn't smell right to me. The documents you signed, they were never filed at City Hall. Technically, you're still married." "What does that mean?" "It means that Beatrice lied to Olivia about the annulment, and it means that there are more lies involved in all of this." Julian took the documents and examined them. Marcus was right. The papers were fake. Very well done, but fake. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus sighed. "Because I saw her transferring money to strange accounts. Because I overheard phone conversations she had with lawyers about accelerating the company's transition process. And because," he hesitated, "because I saw how happy you were in those 2 weeks. I've never seen you like that, Julian." Julian sat down heavily on the sofa. "So Olivia is still my wife, and she probably doesn't know it." Julian was silent for a long moment. "She hated me when she left. She believes I married her out of pity." "And did you?" Marcus's direct question caught Julian off guard. He thought about the 2 weeks of marriage, the nights he had spent in Olivia's apartment, the way his day only seemed complete when he saw her. In the beginning, maybe, Julian admitted, but in the end, I was in love with her. Then you need to fight for her. How? She hates me. She's hidden away in Pennsylvania, and my reputation is destroyed. Marcus stood up. Brother, you built an empire from nothing. Do you really think you can't win back a woman you love? After Marcus left, Julian was left alone with a crucial decision to make. He could accept defeat and let Beatrice win, or he could fight for the only thing that really mattered, Olivia. In Pittsburgh, Olivia was also making a decision. She called Anna Christina. I agree to help, she said, but with one condition. What? When we expose Beatrice and Raphael, I want to confront Julian personally. He deserves an explanation. And then? Olivia touched her stomach, where the pregnancy was finally beginning to show. Then, we'll see if there's anything left to save. What neither of them knew was that the next morning, both would be on the same flight back to New York, sitting just 3 rows apart, preparing for the final battle of their lives. The confrontation took place in the most unlikely place, the lobby of Vance Holdings, on a Monday morning. Olivia had arrived in New York on Saturday and spent Sunday with Anna Christina, preparing the strategy to confront Raphael. But when she arrived at the company building to meet the journalist, she discovered that Julian was there too. For the first time since his removal. They saw each other through the glass of the lobby at the same instant. Julian was getting out of the elevator, visibly thinner and with dark circles under his eyes. Olivia was entering through the main door, her pregnancy now evident under the coat she was wearing. For a moment, both stopped, as if time had frozen. It was Julian who moved first, crossing the lobby towards her with determined steps. You came back, he said, his voice laden with an emotion he didn't try to hide. I came to find the truth, Olivia replied, trying to maintain her composure, but feeling her heart race at the sight of him. What truth? The truth about Raphael, about Beatrice, about this whole sham. Julian frowned. What did you find out? Before Olivia could answer, a familiar voice echoed through the lobby. What a touching reunion. Beatrice Vance was descending the main staircase with all her usual elegance, but there was something different in her expression, a coldness that she no longer bothered to hide. Beatrice, Julian said, his voice hardening. What a surprise. For me too, darling. I thought Olivia had gotten the message and stayed in Pennsylvania. I got the message, Olivia said, stepping forward. I understood that you paid Raphael to leak the story even after I had accepted your money. Beatrice's face showed no surprise. Can you prove anything? I can, a new voice said. Anna Christina entered the lobby, accompanied by 2 men in suits. Behind them, with a pale face and a panicked expression, came Rafael Santos. Raphael here had a very enlightening conversation with us last night, Anna Christina announced. He told us all about the payments he received, the instructions you gave, and even the blackmail plan you two devised together. Beatrice still tried to maintain her composure. I don't know what you're talking about. I have the recordings, Raphael said, his voice trembling. I recorded all of our conversations as insurance. When I found out the police were investigating, I decided to cooperate. Julian looked at Beatrice with an expression of utter disappointment. Why? Why did you do this to us? Because you were throwing away 20 years of work for a woman you met a month ago, Beatrice exploded, finally losing her composure. Because Isabella Montero could have guaranteed the future of the company. Because you were being irrational. Irrational, Julian repeated. I was being human. You were being weak. He was being the man you and my father raised him to be, Marcus said, appearing beside Julian. A man who stands up for what's right. Beatrice looked around, realizing she had lost. The 2 plainclothes police officers approached. Beatrice Vance, one of them said, you're under arrest for extortion, blackmail, and document fraud. As Beatrice was led away, still protesting her innocence, Raphael approached Olivia. Olivia, I'm sorry. I just wanted money. I never thought it would come to this. You never thought, Olivia replied with contempt. That's always been the difference between us. When they were finally alone in the lobby, Anna Christina had left to write her story, Marcus had gone to take care of the lawyers, and Raphael had been taken away for questioning. Julian and Olivia looked at each other. We're still married, Julian said softly. The annulment documents were fake, I know. Anna Christina told me. And what does that mean to you? Olivia touched her stomach, feeling the baby move. It means I have a decision to make. What decision? Whether it's worth fighting for a marriage that started with lies. Julian approached slowly. What if I told you that they weren't all lies? Which ones were true? That I married you because I wanted to protect you, that I fell in love with you in those 2 weeks, that I felt a terrible void when you left. He stopped 3 feet away. That deal or no deal, I loved you, Olivia. I love you. Olivia felt tears running down her face. How can I be sure it's not pity? Because pity doesn't hurt like this, Julian said, touching his own chest. Because pity doesn't make me want to be with you every day for the rest of my life. Because pity doesn't make me dream about our child growing up in my arms. Our child, if you let me. If you want me to be the father he deserves. Olivia studied him for a long moment. She saw the vulnerability that he was allowing her to see, the cautious hope in his eyes, the way he was waiting for her answer, as if his life depended on it. I love you too, she said finally. That's why it hurt so much to leave. That's why I accepted Beatrice's money, because I thought it was better for you. Julian closed the distance between them in 2 steps and took her in his arms, kissing her with all the desperation and relief he had accumulated in recent weeks. When they finally separated, Olivia smiled through her tears. So what do we do now? Now, Julian said, placing his hand on her stomach. The right way this time, with honesty, with love, and without outside interference. And the company, Julian smiled, the company will recover. With the evidence that we were victims of blackmail, the board will have to reinstate me. And if they don't, I'll build another one. Just like that. With you by my side, everything seems simple. 6 months later, Julian and Olivia renewed their vows in an intimate ceremony in the penthouse of the hospital where Sophia Helena Vance had been born a week earlier. The baby was sleeping in the arms of Helena, who had fully recovered and insisted on being called Grandma Lena by her granddaughter. Julian had regained control of Vance Holdings, which had fully recovered from the scandal when the truth came to light. Anna Christina won an investigative journalism award for her report on corporate manipulation and blackmail. Beatrice was sentenced to 3 years in prison, but served only 1 year before being released for community service. She never tried to contact Julian again. Raphael disappeared after serving his community service sentence and was never seen again. Are you sure you really want to raise a daughter who isn't biologically yours? Olivia asked Julian one night as they watched Sophia sleeping in the crib next to the bed. Julian smiled, putting his arm around his wife. Olivia, family isn't about DNA. It's about choice, about commitment, about love. And I choose you both every day. Even knowing that we started with so many lies, especially knowing that, Julian replied, kissing the top of her head. Because now we know that true love can be born even from the most improbable circumstances. Olivia snuggled against him, listening to her daughter's soft breathing and the heartbeat of the man who had become her family. Outside, the city of New York sparkled in the darkness, but inside that room, she had finally found her place in the world. And for the first time in their lives, both Julian and Olivia understood that sometimes the best love stories begin not with love at first sight, but with 2 broken people who decide to heal together.